Hi, this is Carl again from Lingua Genesis, and what I'm going to talk to you about in this particular video is a technique, a method of teaching which can be used so that students and learners of a foreign language have the feeling that they're able to pick up vocabulary within a very short period of time, gain the ability to construct phrases of increasing length, and with that become linguistically proficient within just a very short period of time. Now what I'm going to do is to demonstrate how the building up of sentences using vocabulary can help the learner or the student to achieve that particular goal. And more often than not, when, for example, somebody telephones me or sends me an email to say that they're interested in learning a foreign language and that they'd like to do that with me, they often mention that what they want to be able to do is to speak the language. Very often people will ask for conversational Spanish or conversational German. And this particular method is one which will enable them to do that. And what the method entails is the delivery of new vocabulary for the learner on the basis of the spoken language. Now, some people who ascribe to this methodology would say you don't need to write anything down. But what I believe is a good thing is that if language is learnt orally on a one-to-one or small group basis between the student and the learner, and oral language, spoken language can take place then. But at the same time, the occasional making of notes is arguably going to help the learner, especially the visual learner, to better themselves in terms of establishing some kind of link, some kind of contact between what they speak and what they see written down. So for example, they say something correctly and then they write it down, and whilst they're doing that, they're processing what they've just said and they're giving thought to the order of the words as they're being written down. And then obviously afterwards, after the particular phrase which they've rendered in the spoken language is completed, then they have the visual reference to bear in mind, to keep in mind what they've just said, and at a later date they can use that visual reference as a means of, let's say, revision. So I do believe that given the amount of visual learners which we have in today's society, that while the emphasis should be on the spoken language, there should be some kind of provision to allow the student or learner to make any visual notes so that that link between what we speak and what we see written down can be established. And obviously this is what happens to each and every one of us as we're learning in our own language, our first language. As we're growing up in our first few years, we speak the language, and then after a while we begin to develop our reading skills. And arguably some of the words which we have stored in our brain are ones which we've seen first written down and then learned to pronounce, and as a result being able to store within our memory. So I'll give you an example of how this works, and I've used the Spanish language to demonstrate this particular method. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a verb, or a verb form in Spanish, build round it, and either place words before the verb, place words after the verb, turn sentences into questions, or replace words within questions or statements with other words, but which nevertheless will not affect the word order in question. So here are a few examples. I'll say them in English and then give them in Spanish. And what I'll do as well is I'll continue this discussion in a second part to this particular video. She goes, or she's going. Va. She's not going. No va. Extending the phrase, she's not going to the beach. No va a la playa. He's not going to the beach. Identical, because the verb form in Spanish refers to both he, she and it. No va a la playa. Question, with the addition of a word up front. Why is he or she not going to the beach? ¿Por qué no va a la playa? replacing the question word por qué with an extra couple of words to change from a question back into a sentence or statement. Mi madre no va a la playa. My mother is not going to the beach. Tu madre no va a la playa. Your mother is not going to the beach. Extending the example by adding a question word up front, turning the statement back into a question. ¿Por qué tu madre no va a la playa? My mother is going to the beach. Mi madre va a la playa. The next example, changing two elements of the sentence, changing the noun and negating the sentence. Mi padre no va a la playa. My father is not going to the beach. Now what I'll do is I'll continue examples of this kind in part 2 of the video, and after I've given the last of the examples, what I will then do is to show you just how many points of grammar have been covered without having necessarily had to refer to the grammar terminology in question.